Consent to enter into a colloquy with my Republican colleagues for 30 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, earlier today, this morning on the Senate floor, Senator Durbin called on Republican members to offer to give up what he called their federal health care, and he had heard his comments. He makes an interesting argument, but once again, Democrats in the Senate are ignoring history, as the Senator did today, ignoring the facts and ignoring the Democrats' record on this issue. The truth is that Republicans have already offered in this body to give up their health insurance coverage. In fact, here's the rest of the story. During the debate on the health care law, almost 2 years ago today, Republicans offered to forego their private coverage and instead enroll all members of Congress in Medicaid, the government's safety net program for low-income individuals. The Democrats in this body unanimously rejected this idea. Unanimously rejected this idea. Every Democrat voted no. This was on amendment by former Senator Lemieux from Florida, an amendment that asked to enroll all members of Congress in the Medicaid program. Yet at least 50% of the newly covered individuals under the Democrats' new law is going to get coverage. These people will get their coverage through Medicaid. So the President's solution for health care in this country is to put 50% of the newly covered individuals under Medicaid, but yet the Democrat members of the United States Senate unanimously voted no. If Democrats believe that Medicaid is good enough for the 24 million people they will soon force onto the rolls, my question is, why isn't it good enough for the Democrat members of Congress? And so I'm joined today by my colleagues on the floor who continue to raise questions about the health care law and the so many broken promises made by this President. I'm fortunate to be joined by a senior member of the Senate Finance Committee, Senator Grassley. And I would ask my colleague from Iowa, as a senior member of the Senate Finance Committee, you spent a lot of time studying and debating President Obama's health care law. My question to you, Senator Grassley, is do you think that the President's promises match the reality?
Senator from Wyoming. Definitely not. And Americans are seeing every day that that isn't the case. If I could respond a little bit more in length, I would go back to 1994 and point out a problem that President Clinton had and that in turn President Obama tried to avoid about 14 years later. It was in 1994 that the health care reform issue came before the Congress, promoted by President Clinton at that time, and it failed, and in a large part because it fundamentally changed the health care coverage for nearly every American. Now, we know that the bill that is now law has fundamentally changed. But President Obama in 2009 and throughout his campaign in 2008 decided that he would combat the failure of the Clinton administration on health care reform and not being successful there by repeating over and over again to Americans, if you like what you have, you can keep it. It's basically what we heard on at least 47 different times through while the bill on health care reform was being debated. Now, we heard that from the President himself. We probably heard it by members of this Congress, hundreds of times. And while it may have been politically useful to make that promise to the American people, Senator Barrasso, it remains a promise that he can't keep and he didn't keep. The fact is that millions of Americans are seeing changes in their existing health plan due to the health reform law. And so basically, when the President says, if you like what you have, you can keep it, it's not turning out that way, and Americans are seeing it every day. The administration's regulations governing so-called grandfathered health plans will force most firms and up to 80% of the small businesses to give up their current health programs, and that's happening fairly regularly. When those businesses lose grandfather status, they immediately become subject to costly new mandates and increased premiums that follow. So the economics of health care costs and health care insurance dictate that you aren't going to be able to keep what you have, as the President promised. Families in 17 states no longer have access to child-only plans as a result of health law. So if you were a voter in 2008 and the President said to you, you like what you have, you can keep it, and you wanted only health insurance for your children, you can't do that today in these 17 states. It's not known how many families that lost coverage for their children because of the law have been able to find an affordable replacement. In Medicare Advantage, that's about 20% of the senior citizens of America. There's a study showing Medicare Advantage enrollment is going to be cut in half. Choices available to seniors are going to be reduced by 2/3. Then there is the open question about Americans who receive their health care through large employers. The CBO recently released a report that constructed a scenario where as many as 20 million Americans could lose their employer's coverage. And while I acknowledge that the Congressional Budget Office report provided the number that I just mentioned as only one plausible scenario, there are many who believe that that's very plausible given the incentives in the health care law created for large businesses. So, Senator Barrasso, 47 times, just while we were debating it, I don't know how many times during the campaign, this President said, if you like what you have, you can keep it. It's a promise that was not kept.
Well, and it's interesting, I say to my colleague from Iowa that we take a look at this and so many promises. That reflects one specific promise, if you like what you have, you can keep it. You know, I practiced orthopedic surgery for 25 years, taking care of families in Wyoming. Many of those families include family members who are on Medicare, the program for our seniors. And then Senator Grassley has made some reference in the earlier comments about seniors, people that are on Medicare, people that are having a harder time finding a doctor, and this health care law clearly had an impact on seniors as well. So I would ask my colleague from Iowa, are there specific things that you've been hearing as you travel around the state visiting with folks at home in terms of perhaps promises made specifically to seniors and those broken promises related to Medicare?
That's not only a promise that's been broken, that's a promise that is very easily to quantify. Because the President said on July the 29th, 2009, during the consideration of this health care reform law, the President said, quote, Medicare is a government program, but don't worry, I'm not going to touch it, end of quote. So let's take a look at the health care law and see if that promise was kept. The health care law made significant cuts in Medicare programs. And this is what you can quantify in dollars and cents. On April the 22nd, 2010, the chief actuary of Medicare analyzed the law and found that it would cut Medicare by $575 billion over 10 years. The President said about Medicare, as I told you, I'm not going to touch it. But the President has touched it in a big way. $575 billion out of Medicare. And that's when Medicare is in a road on a path to go broke by 2021. $575 billion isn't going to guarantee Medicare for everybody in the future. We've got to reform and change Medicare if that promise is going to be kept. And we all want to do that. But the President has made that more difficult. The Congressional Budget Office wrote that over $500 billion in Medicare reductions would, quote, would not enhance the ability of the government to pay future Medicare benefits, end of quote. And you know what the President said during the debate on this bill? I'm not going to touch it. But he has touched it in a big way. The chief actuary had this to say about the Medicare reductions. Quote, providers, meaning hospitals, doctors, providers for whom Medicare constitutes a substantive portion of their business could find it difficult to remain profitable and, absent legislative intervention, might end their participation in the program. So not only touching it in $500 and some billion, but also touching it in a way of limiting access for senior citizens of America. When the President said, I'm not going to touch it, he misled the American people. The CM actuary said, in essence, these cuts could drive providers from the Medicare program. And I have a hard time to understand how these massive cuts to Medicare count as somehow I'm not going to touch Medicare. On the other hand, the biggest problem facing Medicare in the near term is a physician's payment update problem that we constantly have to address and could have been addressed in the health care reform bill, and you know what? It wasn't addressed. Of course, nothing was done about it. Perhaps that's what the President meant when he said about Medicare, Senator Barrasso, I'm not going to touch it.
Well, and that clearly points out to the people around the country what they know, if they're on Medicare, that it is that much more challenging for them to even find a doctor because of the $500 billion of cuts to Medicare, and not to save Medicare, not to strengthen Medicare, but to start a whole new government program for other people. So those are several of the promises that the President made. We just heard from my colleague from Iowa is that if you like what you have, you can keep it, and we know that that promise has been broken. And now the promises about the President of I will protect Medicare, which is clearly not the case, as the American people have seen, which is why this health care law is even more unpopular today than it was when it was passed. But thinking back to the time that it was passed, the senator from Missouri who's joining us on the floor, Senator Blunt, was very actively involved in the debate and the discussions in pointing out the concerns that people at home in his home state had with regard to the health care law and the objections that he heard. And my recollection is that there was even an issue on the ballot about the health care law and mandates and issues. So I would ask my friend and colleague from Missouri if there are things that he would like to add in to help with this discussion of the broken promises of the Obama health care law.
Well, Doctor, I thank you for your leadership on this issue during the debate of the health care law itself and right up now on the second anniversary of it being signed into law. And certainly Missouri voters were the first voters that went to the polling place and registered their view of this, which, as I recall, is like 72% said, no, we don't want to be part of it. Now, the national number on approval appears to be catching up with that. The famous comment that was made on the other side of the building by the Speaker, that we'll know what's in the bill once we pass it, has proven to be very true and not very positive from the point of view of that bill. And it was the promises that you and Senator Grassley have talked about already, the promise not to touch Medicare, the promise that if you like what you can have, you can keep it. And surely nobody can say that with a straight face anymore. And the promise that there wouldn't be a mandate during the campaign. You know, 4 years ago, this was the big division between the two principal candidates for the nomination on that side. And Senator Obama's view was that there would be no mandate. There's no need for a mandate. In fact, at one point he said that having a mandate would be like solving homelessness by mandating that everybody buy a house. Now, that's not my quote. That's President Obama's quote when he was Senator Obama. Having a mandate on health care would be like solving the housing problem by saying we're going to require that everybody buy a house. This plan does not work. It doesn't come together. The parts of the plan that were supposed to pay for the plan are one by one being discarded. Remember, Senators, the Class Act, the so-called Class Act, the Long-Term Care Act, which technically, I guess, would have produced some money because you collected money the first 10 years, the 10 years you're counting the money, and you're not allowed to spend any of it for the first 10 years. So sure, that would be a net income to the federal government. You're not spending anything, everything's coming in. But even the Secretary of Health and Human Services said what many of us said at the time, this plan won't work. So we're not even going to collect the money because we know that that there's no way this particular structure will do what it's supposed to do. So it's just one broken promise after another, one set of things that the more the American people look at it, they realize that this just doesn't add up. And not only does it not add up financially, it doesn't add up to better health care. We're going to see lots of people. The Congressional Budget Office recently estimated that I think 20 million people that get insurance now at work would lose that insurance at work once this goes into effect. And that was not a calculation in the original bill. Everybody was calculating at least that anybody who has insurance now their employer would continue to pay for it. Well, 20 million of them apparently that's not going to be the case. And you know, I'd go back to you on that topic of just what employers are going to have to decide to do once they're faced with this new mandated policy that covers not what they think they can afford, but whatever some government official decides is the perfect policy for all Americans. Now imagine that, the perfect policy for all Americans. One size fits all almost always means that one size doesn't fit anybody. But this perfect policy and these employers, it's now understood, are in many cases just going to take the option. We'll pay the penalty that's less than we're paying now for insurance, and we'll let our employees, we're going to have to require our employees to go get their insurance in a subsidized exchange, which means taxpayers are helping buy insurance for people that today the employers buy insurance for at the rate of at least 20 million, and I think that number will be a lot higher than that, Senator.
Well, it does seem that way to me, to the point that now 2 years out, Senator Coburn and I put together a report on what we're finding. It's called a checkup on the federal health law, and the title is Warning Side Effects, because there are huge side effects from this health care law. And the four that we've written out on the prescription pad, as we see it, as the prescription pad handed out by President Obama, number one is fewer choices. Number two, we have higher taxes. Number three, more government. And four is less innovation. That's what the American people are seeing as the side effects of this health care law, things that they don't want. They don't want fewer choices. People want more choices. People don't want higher taxes. They want lower taxes. They don't want more government. They want less government. They don't want less innovation. They want more innovation. That's what the American people ask for. There was a reason to do health care reform, because people wanted the care that they need from a doctor they want at a cost they can afford. And I know that's what my colleague from Iowa sees when he goes home every weekend and talks to people in his home communities.
Could I add one thing at this point? We don't really know how bad this bill is yet, or this law is yet, and I'm going to add something to what Senator Blunt said when you quoted the Speaker of the House saying, we don't really know what's in this bill, you're going to have to pass it to find out what's in it. That's what she had to say to get a majority vote, even of her own party, to get it through the House of Representatives. But in a sense, she's right. You can read you could understand every letter of this law, but it has 1,693 delegations of authority for the Secretary to write regulations, and until they're written, you aren't really going to know what's in it. And you remember the Accountable Care Organization rules that came out, 6 pages out of 2,700 in the bill dealt with accountable care organizations, but the first regulations that were written were 350 pages long. So we really don't know how bad this legislation is, maybe for a few years down the road, and hopefully we never get that far down the road.
And my understanding from the Accountable Care Organization component of this is that the very health programs that the Accountable Care Organizations were referred to, the ones that the President held up as the models across the country, and one was in Utah, one was Geisinger in Pennsylvania, I believe the Mayo Clinic may have been a third. Once all of those 350 pages of regulations came out, the programs that the President says this is the model that we want to follow, they all said, we can't comply with these regulations. They're too stringent. They're too confining. They won't work at our program. So if they're not going to work at the kind of places that the President said are doing it well, to me that means they're not going to work anywhere in Wyoming, and very likely not anywhere in Iowa or anywhere in Missouri as we go and try to make sure patients can get the care that they need from the doctor that they want at a cost that they can afford. I mean, those are the things, and that's why I continue to look at this health care law and go home every weekend and talk to people and continue to hear that this bill is bad for patients, bad for providers, the nurses and the doctors who take care of those patients, and bad for taxpayers. When we take a look at and Senator Blunt made a comment about this with the Medicare and some of the changes, who's going to make these decisions? It looks to me, from reading through this law, that it's unelected bureaucrats, 15 unelected bureaucrats with this so-called Independent Payment Advisory Board, people who will decide what hospitals would get paid for providing various services, so that in small communities the hospital may say, well, we can no longer offer that service. You know, I've heard my colleagues talk about the specific loss of the availability of hospitals to even stay profitable with some of the cuts from taking $500 billion away from Medicare, again, not to save and strengthen Medicare, but to start a whole new government program for others. I mean, those are the things that we're dealing with, and why at town hall meeting after town hall meeting, people continue to tell me they want this repealed and they want it replaced with patient-centered health care, not government-centered, not insurance company-centered, patient-centered health care. That's what people are asking for, and they get tired of all of these broken promises that the President has made. You know, I mean, I remember he said he's going to bring down the price of premiums by $2,500 per family per year. What family wouldn't want that? Because the whole purpose of the health care law initially was to get the cost of health care under control. This didn't do that. If I go to a town hall meeting, as I did not too long ago in Wyoming, and say, how many of you, under the new health care law, are finding that you're paying more for health insurance? Not the $2,500 less a year that the President promised. How many of you are paying more? Every hand goes up. And then you ask the question, how many of you believe that the quality and the availability of your own care is going to go down as a result of this health care law? Every hand goes up. And I know in the show me state of Missouri, that's not what people want. They don't want to pay more and get less. And I don't know if my colleagues have been hearing things similar to that at home.
Well, that's exactly what I think we're all hearing. Whether you were for this bill or not, my guess is that you're hearing that if you're asking that question. And, you know, the President's promise, another promise, that an average family would, if his health care plan went into effect, would have $2,500 less, as you just said, Doctor, per year. In fact, since he became President, insurance premiums have risen by $2,213 a year. Not a $2,500 cut, but a $2,213 increase, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation. The survey is that in 2008, employer-provided insurance, the average family premium was $12,860. Last year, it was $15,073. These are incredible increases for families that, along with the bad energy policies and other policies, put families into a condition that they would hope not to be in, and we'd hope for them not to be in. So you've got increased cost to families, increased cost to the system. That's the other thing the President said. Another broken promise was that this health care bill would control cost. Recently, according to the Medicare actuary, the person that calculates these costs, the estimate was that national health spending would go up at least $311 billion over 10 years under this plan. Now, that's not cost control. That's $311 billion, almost a third of $1 trillion in increases. Payment reductions to hospitals. You mentioned this board that will make these decisions. I'm not sure that there'll be enough people on that board that understand rural hospitals, to understand why it's critical that rural hospitals that are critical care hospitals continue to have different arrangements with the government than others do for the government-provided health care, like Medicare and Medicaid. And if they understand that, There may not be enough people on the board that understand the unique needs of urban hospitals that have a heavily uninsured population. How is this 15-member board going to be better than the 500 members that serve people in Washington now, trying to look at specifics and then be accountable? Who's this board accountable to? What decision do they make that somebody can challenge in a meaningful way, in a way that they'd be really concerned about? So it doesn't control cost, as the President said it would. It doesn't reduce insurance costs, as the President said it would. I think it will wind up with maybe even more people uninsured, as long as the penalty that you pay is less than the premiums you're going to pay, particularly for young workers who are outside the system today. In the President's plan, you eliminate the advantage that they have for being young and healthy by saying, no, you can't really classify groups where if you go get life insurance, you certainly pay more if you're 75 for life insurance than if you're 27. If you have, you're just going to pay less. And it's the same way today for health insurance as well, because it's clear that the likelihood of your using that plan at 26 is different than it is at 62. And so all of these things just don't add up, and people are beginning to figure they don't add up. And I thought Senator Grassley made a very good point about even when we pass the bill, you won't know all of the cost of this bill till it actually goes into effect. And I'm very much in support of his view that we never want to let this get so far down the road we know how much it would really cost, or all of the rules and regulations you would really have, because it will head health care in a direction that we might not be able to reverse course and get to a health care system that's really focused on patients and health care providers rather than government bureaucrats deciding what's the best health care for everybody. I want my doctor to decide. I want to be part of that discussion. I don't want some government bureaucrat deciding what procedure is the only procedure that's acceptable for me.
Well, and it's interesting, because I know you go home, as I do, very, very often, to talk to many of the small business owners in the state of Missouri, as I do in Wyoming, as Senator Grassley does in Iowa. And one of the promises that the President made is he said 4 million small businesses may be eligible for tax credits. 4 million small businesses may be eligible for tax credits. Well, it turns out that the key word there by the President is may be eligible. Even though the fact that the White House had sent out postcards to all these small businesses, the IRS spent over $1 million in taxpayers' money to send out millions of postcards promoting the tax credit. The Treasury Department's Inspector General recently testified that, quote, the volume of credit claims has been lower than expected. As a matter of fact, only 7% of the 4 million firms the administration claimed. Why? Well, because of the complexity and the whole way that the system was set up, the President was able to talk big and deliver very small. And that's why so many people are very, very unhappy with the claims in the health care law, because they know that these promises have been broken. And with regard to the Nancy Pelosi's famous quote that first you have to pass it before you get to find out what's in it, that's why I come to the floor every week with a doctor's second opinion, because it does seem that just about every week we learn some new unintended consequence, something new about the health care law, and another reason why Americans are unhappy with it, why it remains as unpopular, if not more unpopular today as when it was passed, and why so many people believe that the Supreme Court should find this bill unconstitutional for the reasons that really do have Americans at home really in an uproar. Very unhappy that the government can come into their homes and mandate that they buy a government-approved product and they pay for it or pay a fine. Nothing like this has happened before, and people are frankly offended. We don't know what the Supreme Court is going to do, but I know what this body ought to do. This body ought to vote to repeal and replace this broken health care law and really get a health care law in place, which is what the American people wanted, which is the care they need from the doctor that they want at a price they can afford. And we have not seen that yet, but that's why we are here on the second anniversary of the President's health care law to continue to point out the flaws of this. And quite interestingly, when you take a look at some of the national poll numbers for people who have talked to a health care provider, whether that be a nurse, a doctor, a physician assistant, a physical therapist, a nurse practitioner, no matter who, they are even less supportive of it than the general public.
So Senator has used 30 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President. Senator from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I enjoy the presentation before me and the two senators dealing on the issues surrounding health care. I think it's a very relevant discussion that we need to all pay attention to. I want to talk on two issues today. I'll start first with the crowdfunding amendment that's coming up between Senator Bennett, Senator Merkley, and I. Something that we have been working on in a truly bipartisan manner, as it should be done here, as I do many of my actions. For those of you who may be listening, either up in the gallery or on television, crowdfunding is an opportunity for individuals to invest money upwards of $1,000, upwards of $1 million total, so $1,000 per person, totaling $1 million. Not dealing with a lot of the traditional SEC filings that are in place and a lot of the other problems in which only very wealthy people in years past have been able to participate in these types of offerings. For example, right now, if I had a good idea and I wanted some of my friends to invest in it, and then we go and we start marketing, we couldn't do that. That's illegal. And one of the President's objectives in his job speech was to talk about these new opportunities, and crowdfunding is one of them. He supports it. The House has done a similar crowdfunding bill, and we're actually just taking this crowdfunding opportunity and putting a little bit more safeguards in it. I think that our bill is different. Well, I know our bill is different than the House bill in that the House bill doesn't require that you actually are a legal business or even some kind of incorporated legal form before you try to issue stock. And that bothers me somewhat in that you could have just somebody in their living room, taking people's money and issuing stock with really no check and balance. I think that's important. It also doesn't require that you offer securities through an intermediary. You could just put up your own Twitter site. Buy shares is my great idea. Come on and buy shares. All the experts agree that we would need to require an intermediary site like an eBay where the crowd can help identify the good and bad players, the way that eBay uses to identify bad sellers on their site. It also, as I said, allows investments to take place that really can't be done right now, and allow those entities, those groups, to take that money and either use it as the investment seed money to create those new ideas and new jobs. As we know, startup businesses are the entities that are actually looking to create jobs at this point, and or use that money as seed money to go to a more traditional lender and say, hey, we have a great idea, and we also have some money to back it up, and we'd ask you to sign on with us. So I'm hopeful that the amendment comes up. I understand it is, and I'm looking forward to having that very important vote. Just give me for 1 minute, Mr. President. So I would appreciate, obviously, you and everyone else giving strong consideration of that. Thank you. Everything's dropping here. And, Mr. President, I'd like to shift gears for a minute and talk about the Women Against Violence Act. As we know, well, you may not know, Jessica Pripstein of East Hampton, Lisa Stilkey of Douglas, Belinda Torres of Worcester, Kristen Broderick of Haverhill, Patricia Froy of Marshfield, Edinalva Vieira of Brighton, Milka Rivera of Lawrence, Nashish Nurani of East Boston, Casey Taylor of Winthrop, Alessa Castellan of Roslindale, Lauren Astley of Wayland, Michael Trusty of Edgartown, Janice Santos of Worcester, Beth Spartacino of Easton, Sun Tran of Lowell, Jetty Lincoln of Plymouth, Mass., David Walton of Taunton, Massachusetts, Elaine McCall of Wakefield, Jennifer Frudenthal of Webster, Brian Bergeron of Malden, Lancelot Reed of Dorchester, Joel Eccles of Springfield, Maria Avellini Palachuicha Sela of Brockton, and Troy Burston of Medford, Joseph Scott of Worcester, and Adorito Cardozo of Brockton. Mr. President, those are names that I just read, constituents of mine that have been killed by their husbands, wives, partners, girlfriends, or boyfriends in domestic violence incidents in 2011 and 2012 alone. And it's only March of this year. It's unacceptable. Those lives that have been lost are tragic. But in addition to the people who have lost their lives, the lives of the victims' children and families and friends have been destroyed. I know because, Mr. President, I was a victim of domestic violence, and as a child I watched as my mother was beaten by abusive stepfathers, and I did what I could to protect my mom and my sister, but as a young boy, there was only so much I could do. I remember vividly being a 6-year-old boy going to protect my mom and getting beaten on until the police came, and it's something that still lives with me, and I try to use that experience and knowledge to help in many different ways. And when I was growing up, there, quite frankly, weren't the resources that are available to victims that are available today. I wish my mother had known back then that she wasn't alone. I wish she could use one of the fantastic support providers that now exist in Massachusetts today. And since being elected in the Senate, I've been moved by the organizations in my state that are stepping up to the plate and continuously step up to the plate each and every day to provide support to victims of domestic violence. And quite frankly, as a government, we've made tremendous progress in helping victims get their life and lives back in order. Not only the victims themselves, but the family members of those victims. The Violence Against Women Act was first signed into law in 1994, as you know, and made a bold statement that we would redouble our efforts to support law enforcement efforts to crack down on offenders and assist those working in our communities to provide assistance to victims seeking a new way of life away from the violence that they have been subjected to. In each reauthorization, we have improved upon the previous bill and made it stronger and made stronger commitments to those who have been abused. Now is not the time, let me repeat, now is not the time to take our foot off the gas and avoid dealing with this problem. Mr. President, the landmark Violence Against Women Act must be reauthorized this year. I am incredibly proud to have co-sponsored this reauthorization when it first came to my attention, and I believe it makes critical commitments against this horrific problem. And historically, VAWA has been a bipartisan effort where parties locked arms in support of law enforcement and victims against perpetrators of domestic violence. And it was a glimmer of hope for an otherwise contentious and overly partisan atmosphere. I got to tell you, this isn't the first time I've said this, but there's no Democrat bill that's going to pass. There's no Republican bill that's going to pass for those listening. It needs to be a bipartisan, bicameral bill that the President will sign. And I've been deeply troubled this year that this year's reauthorization has become, once again, partisan. There's no reason for it. There's no excuse for it. We just did the Hire a Hero veterans. We did the 3% withholding. We're doing the insider trading. We did the highway bill. There's no reason why we can't do the VAWA bill on a completely nonpartisan basis. And I'm on the floor today to call on my colleagues to band together and pass this reauthorization and send a very strong signal to Americans that the Senate, yes, the Senate stands united in recognizing victims from across the country to give them the help that they need and obviously deserve. In Massachusetts, VAWA is supported by law enforcement and many service providers that are on the front lines of assisting in domestic violence victims. I know previously as an attorney, I dealt in family law matters. I know of the yeoman's work that these entities do. And on Friday, I will be visiting Voices Against Violence in Framingham, Mass. They received the VAWA funding that has already been provided to support direct services to victims and survivors of sexual assault and ensures that a trained rape crisis counselor is available after hours and on weekends. The YMCA of Central Mass and Worcester uses those funds for a proactive program that has service providers working very closely with law enforcement to provide information, identify and provide information for domestic violence victims and advocate on their behalf at a time when, quite frankly, these folks need advocates. Because of VAWA, Reach Beyond Abuse in Waltham has supported many cutting-edge prevention efforts with teens and placement of advocates in police departments. There's a symbiotic, a give-and-take relationship in those departments. The Gene Krieger Crisis Center in Newburyport, where my dad lives, used VAWA funds to establish a high-risk homicide prevention project and was recently recognized by the White House for their work. Mr. President, I could go on and on and on about the tremendous involvement in great organizations, not only in my state but throughout this country, that are making a difference in the lives of victims. And we need to stand as a body and not get into party rhetoric and declare to women across America that they are not alone in this fight. We need to do everything in our power to help the millions of women, like my mom, who were once in this situation and are now survivors. And we need to help them become survivors and not just victims. So I call upon my colleagues to join me in sending a very, very strong bipartisan vote and get this done. So, Mr. President, I yield the new Mr. President, I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum. Thank you.
Would the senator withhold his request?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't recognize.
Mr. President.
The senator from California.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the distinguished senator from Massachusetts for his remarks in support of the Violence Against Women Act. I believe that this bill will be before us shortly, and Senator Brown, we will count on your vote. So we look forward to that. Mr. President, I rise today to pay tribute to a public servant, a social worker, and a tenacious advocate for vulnerable Americans. I rise today to honor a trailblazer and a mentor for me and countless others. I rise today to honor an outstanding United States Senator from Maryland and the Dean of the Senate Women, my friend Barbara Mikulski. I'm privileged to have represented California in this body for almost 20 years. When I first ran for the Senate back in 1992, I received a call from Barbara Mikulski, personally urging me on and reaching out to provide encouragement. I've relied on her advice, her friendship, and the Mikulski brand of candor ever since. As a matter of fact, one of my fondest evenings was a 3-onion martini right down the street. It's hard to believe, but when Senator Mikulski took office in 1987, there was only one other woman in this body, Senator Nancy Castlebaum. Later, Nancy Castlebaum Baker, the great Republican senator from Kansas. Increasing the number of women in the Senate has really been painfully slow. In 1991, the ranks of women in this House rose to 3, then later to 7 after the 1992 election. Today, we have 17 women in this body and 76 in the House. As Senator Mikulski reflected to the Washington Post last year, and I quote, "Women were so rare, even holding statewide political office back then. I was greeted with a lot of skepticism from my male colleagues. Was I going to go the celebrity route of the Senate? I had to work very hard," end quote. And she has. Barbara has worked very, very hard to become an outstanding legislator and a trailblazing public official. Let me list just a few of her firsts. She was the first female Democrat to serve in both chambers of Congress. That in itself is impressive. The first female Democrat to be elected to the Senate without succeeding her husband or her father. The first woman to chair a Senate Appropriations Subcommittee. The first woman to serve a quarter-century in the Senate, and the first woman elevated to a Senate leadership position. She is the only current member of Congress in the National Women's Hall of Fame. And she's not done yet. Just last week, Barb achieved another historic first. According to the Senate Historical Office, she reached 12,800 and 58 days of service, becoming the longest-serving female member of Congress in our nation's history. Senator Mikulski was born and raised in Baltimore, determined to make a difference in her community, and Mr. President, you know that well, and guided by her Catholic faith and a belief in social justice, she became a social worker, helping at-risk children and educating seniors about Medicare. She once said, and I quote, "I feel that I am my brother's keeper and my sister's keeper," end quote. Social work evolved into community activism when Barb successfully organized communities against a plan to build a highway through Baltimore's Fells Point neighborhood. Shortly thereafter, in 1971, she was elected to the Baltimore City Council, where she served 5 years. That was just about the time I was elected to the Board of Supervisors in 1970 in San Francisco. In 1976, she ran for Congress and won, representing Maryland's 3rd District for a decade. She was then elected to the Senate and has won re-election in 1992, 1998, 2004, and 2010 by large majorities. As I said, Barb is an accomplished legislator. She is also one of the very best. She cares passionately about quality education and ensuring every student has access to higher education. She's a fighter for stem cell research to cure our most tragic and debilitating diseases. She's a tireless advocate for the National Institutes of Health. And she is a leader on women's health, writing law requiring federal standards for mammograms, and a fierce proponent of breast and cervical cancer screenings and treatment for uninsured women. We served together on the Intelligence Committee, and she asked some of the most prescient questions. And I've seen her commitment to the FBI, to fighting terrorism, and also to cybersecurity, where she headed a task force for our committee that has resulted in the cybersecurity legislation newly pending. Finally, she has led the way to strengthen pay equity for women. The Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Restoration Act is the law of the land today because of Barbara Mikulski's efforts. As Barb said when we passed the bill, and I quote, "I believe that people should be judged solely by their individual skills, competence, unique talents, and nothing else in the workplace. Once you get a job because of your skills and talents, you better get equal pay for equal work," end quote. Or, in a manner that best captures Barb's candor, she said, and I quote, "Women of America, square your shoulders, put on your lipstick, suit up, and let's close that wage gap once and for all," end quote. To me, that is classic Barbara Mikulski. Let me close with a story. Every so often, at Barbara's leadership, the Senate women get together for dinner. There's no agenda or staff, just Republican women, Democratic women, and a lot of lively conversation. We talk about our families, we talk about the workplace, we talk about the world, and of course, we even talk, to some extent, about this place. Sometimes we'll enjoy Senator Mikulski's world-famous crab cakes, the best you'll ever taste, and second only to Dungeness crab of the West Coast, I might add. Mr. President, if you haven't, make sure you try the recipe on her website. We talk about our families and the way we can work together, and it's a throwback to the civility of the United States Senate. And these dinners are when Barb really stands out as the Dean of Senate Women. Mr. President, women in this country have always had to fight for the most basic of rights. I think young women forget that it wasn't until 1920 that we were able to vote in this country, and it was only because women fought for it. Barb will be the first to say Her milestones are symbols of how far she has come. But she will also show us how much further women have to go. Today we take it for granted that a woman can be Secretary of State. We've had 2. Or Speaker of the House. We've had 1. Or a candidate for president. Not quite yet. Oh, no, I take that back. We have had 1. And one day soon, a woman will sit in the Oval Office of this great country. And when she does, she will owe a great deal to Barbara Mikulski. But on this day, let the congressional record of this Senate reflect and forever record that Senator Barbara Mikulski is the longest-serving woman in the history of the United States Congress. And this country is forever better because of it. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
The Senator from Utah.
Mr. President, I came here to speak on another matter, but I'd like to take just a few minutes to talk about my friend Barbara Mikulski, myself. We've served a long time together. When she came to this body, I think I may have been chairman of what was then called the Labor and Human Resources Committee, now the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. From the day she got on that committee, she made a difference in every way, not just for women, but for every single American in this country. I have a tremendous amount of profound respect for Senator Mikulski and what she's been able to accomplish. Let me just mention one thing. Back in the early 90s, she and I worked together on what was called the FDA Revitalization Act. That act was a very, very important thing because we had the FDA spread out all over the greater Washington, D.C. area, probably 30, 35 different offices, some of which were in converted chicken coops. I mean, it was ridiculous to have these top scientists in anything but a centralized, located with top computerization and all the other scientific instruments that they need doing this work for the American people. I have to say that Barbara Mikulski played a pivotal role in helping to develop that tremendous facility. And I just want you to know that I don't think it would have been developed without her effort and her dogged work to make sure that we now have a centralized, and it still needs improvement, but centralized FDA revitalization campus that literally is saving the lives of millions of people and making the lives of millions of people better. I could go on and on, but I have a lot of respect for my distinguished colleague from Maryland, and I'd feel badly if I didn't get up and tell people how much I do respect her. She believes in what she does. She loves this body most of the time, I think, and she cares for her fellow senators. Well, we care for her, and I just want her to know that. Now, Mr. President, if I could, I would like to just make some other remarks and make sure these remarks are placed in the appropriate place
Without objection.
Mr. President, this Friday the nation observes an anniversary that most Americans would prefer to see removed from its calendar. I'm talking about the second anniversary of the passage of the President's health care law. Rather than celebrate this day, it is one that citizens and taxpayers have come to rue and regret. The process by which Obamacare became law was an affront to the Republican principles of democratic self-government. And the substance of this law is an historic threat to the liberties our Constitution was designed to secure. A decent respect for the opinions of the American people cautioned against passing this law on a purely partisan basis. Yet in spite of the clear opposition of the American people to this massive expansion of government power and to its historic spending and tax increases, the President and his congressional allies were determined to jam this bill through the Congress. The architects of this strategy, if not the party loyalists who carried it out against the wishes of their constituents, sleep easy at night having done so because they knew that this was a once-in-a-generation opportunity, the crowning achievement of the liberal bureaucratic state, a takeover of the nation's health care sector and its top-down regulation by Washington had eluded Democrats for over 70 years. The economic downturn of 2008 changed that. With the election of President Obama and significant majorities in the Congress, the left was not going to, in the words of the President's Chief of Staff, let a crisis go to waste. What this strategy meant in practice was that Democrats would advance a radical liberal agenda whether the American people supported it or not. That is the anniversary that we are observing this week. And it is a dark spot on our nation's history, in my opinion. The Obamacare episode showed a fundamental disrespect for the opinions and constitutional common sense of the American people. Faced with growing unrest and real concerns about the impact of this law on families, the economy, and access to health care, the law's proponents assumed that the American people were just too dumb to get it. But once Obamacare became law, the American people would come to love it, as well as the benefactors who gave it to them. That's what they thought. As Speaker Pelosi explained, we have to pass the bill so you can find out what is in it. The great liberal conceit was on full display in the process that led to this bill becoming law. We know better than you, they said. We can plan 1/6 of the American economy, and you will eventually come to like it. Well, as we all know, the American people had something else in mind. They reminded Congress and the President that this country and people are sovereign. They stood up as free men and women, rejecting Obamacare before it became law and refusing to embrace it afterward. And as their understanding of the law has deepened, they have remained constant in their commitment to full repeal. According to a Rasmussen poll this week, over half of Americans support the full repeal of Obamacare. Next week, the Supreme Court will hear oral argument on the constitutionality of this misguided law. In arriving at their decision later this year, they will consider Obamacare through the prism of past precedents and the Constitution's original historic meaning. But the justices of the Supreme Court are not the only ones evaluating the constitutionality of this law. The American people, as citizens of this nation, have their own obligation to consider whether this law comports with our Constitution and principles of limited government. And on that, the verdict is already in. According to a recent Gallup poll, 72% of American adults, including 56% of self-professed Democrats, believe that the law's individual mandate is unconstitutional. The average American who opposes this law on constitutional grounds might not be a law professor or an appellate advocate, but those citizens and taxpayers understand that our Constitution was designed to guarantee liberty and that it did so in part by limiting the powers of the federal government and maintaining the sovereign powers of the states. They know that the unconstitutionality of Obamacare runs far deeper than the onerous individual mandate. The law is, at its core, a violation of our most deeply held constitutional principles. It undermines personal liberty and puts more power in the hands of the state, that is, the federal government. In the interest of advancing what the left views as a constitutional right to health care, they undermine actual constitutional rights to life, liberty, and property. The law's mandate for abortion-inducing drugs undermines sacred rights of personal conscience and religious liberty. And its expansion of Medicaid fundamentally transforms the relationship of the states to the federal government, undercutting the ability of those sovereign communities to make basic decisions about the welfare of their citizens by crowding out spending for police, infrastructure, and education. The American people might not have submitted complex legal briefs in the Supreme Court litigation, but their conclusions about Obamacare possess a unique and powerful wisdom. The people of Utah and of this country understand that the very DNA of Obamacare, a commitment to more government control, the empowering of an already unaccountable administrative state, and an assault on free markets is unconstitutional. This was not what President Obama promised the American people. The President couched this government takeover of the nation's health care sector as a modest reform designed to reduce costs. When he spoke before a session of Congress in September in 1999, to push for his plan, the President promised that it would, quote, slow the growth of health care costs for our families, our businesses, and our government, unquote. The President swung and missed on all three. According to the President's own actuary at CMS, national health expenditures would increase by $311 billion over the law's first 10 years. This really comes as no surprise to the American people. The President's health care law promised all sorts of new free care, but we all know, contrary to the repeated assertions of President Obama and his administration, that nothing in life is free. The bill will eventually come due for all of this so-called, quote, free care, unquote. And it is taxpayers who are going to pay that bill. According to the Congressional Budget Office, quote, rising costs for health care will push federal spending up considerably as a percentage of GDP, unquote. This is not what the President and his allies promised. We were promised lower costs. What we got were higher costs, more federal spending on health care, and with it, more taxes and more debt. When fully implemented, Obamacare authorizes $2.6 trillion in new federal spending over 10 years. It will increase premiums by $2,100 for families forced by Obamacare to purchase their own insurance. The Medicaid expansions will impose $118 billion in new costs on the states. It will increase spending on prescription drugs, physician and clinical services, and hospital spending. And it will increase the deficit by $701 billion over its first 10 years. And who does the President propose will pay for this? Here's how. He will pay for it by selling more treasuries to China. He will pay for it by increasing taxes and penalties by over $500 billion. And American workers will ultimately pay for it with 800,000 fewer jobs than would have otherwise existed. This is not the story that the President and the Democrats in Congress responsible for this law want the American people to hear. So they will attempt to spin their way out of it. In a memo obtained by the press last week, the advocates of Obamacare laid out their strategy to sell the merits of this misguided law prior to oral arguments at the Supreme Court. This week was designed to lay out all of the great things provided by Obamacare. But naturally, that memo mentions absolutely none of the costs. It does not mention the cost of these benefits for federal taxpayers. It does not mention the cost for employers and workers. It does not mention that the law could lead to as many as 20 million Americans losing their employer-sponsored health benefits by 2019. It does not mention the impact that the $500 billion in tax increases and penalties will have on the economy. And it does not mention the harm that this law does to our Constitution and its principles of republicanism, personal liberty, and limited government. I wish I could say that I was surprised, but I am not. I'm not able to say it because I am not surprised. Obamacare is merely the capstone to a generations-long liberal project that has attempted to convince citizens that they can have their cake and eat it too, that they can have all of the benefits of an ever-expanding welfare state, and that nobody, or only the very rich, would have to pay for it. Obamacare exploded this myth. Obamacare is the culmination of generations of government expansion, and it shows once and for all that we are all going to be paying for the liberal welfare state. Taxing Warren Buffett is not going to cut it. All American families will pay for this $2.6 trillion spending law one way or the other. After centralizing control of the nation's health care system in Washington, D.C., and putting health care decisions into the hands of government bureaucrats, we will all pay for it through higher taxes, less opportunity, and diminished access to care. And our children are going to have to pay for it, as a nation conceived in liberty is increasingly burdened by an unsustainable national indebtedness. That is, unless the American people get the final word on this. They certainly should. I believe in the American people. I know what my fellow Utahns think of the President's health law. No less than legislators or justices, they take the Constitution seriously. And they know that this law is unconstitutional. They know what it does to free markets and to free men and women. They know that if this law is constitutional, then there are effectively no limits on what the federal government can do. They know that this law has to go, and I look forward to showing it the door. I thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
The Deputy Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I rise today to join my colleagues in honoring our friend,